Thank you very much indeed, Aris. And can I just say how delighted I am to have two AI experts, David and Lana, with us today. And thank you so much for joining us. We actually had a bit of a chat yesterday, having watched the video ourselves, to kind of line up some thoughts. David, perhaps if I can pass over to you, because I'm mindful it is an assumption, but I would imagine a large number of the people joining us and perhaps participants, can you just in chat let us know what is the age range and the level of your English language learners? Are they young learners or teenagers in school settings? Are they adults in a private language school? Who do you teach? But David, whilst our participants are filling in that information, you made the point that very often when we're talking about learner autonomy, the the people worry that it's only something that you can really do with older, perhaps even adult learners with a good language level. And you made the point from what you see going into your kids' schools that
Mm.
this just isn't in the case. Could you perhaps tease that out for us a little, please?
Yeah, definitely. I hear, as you say, I hear it a lot. Like, oh, this is great, love it, wonderful. Not beginners, not elementaries, not kids, not really young kids. And it just sort of struck me when I was in my kid's school. He was like 5 at the time, and we were in having a little, you know, parents sit-in day, and the teacher was teaching a lesson. And I just absolutely loved that the teacher was developing these autonomous skills from the age of like 4 or 5 upwards, and the kids were just getting involved. Like there was lovely self-assessment of their own works. There was lovely opportunities for there was choice. That was what I really loved. Choice for the kids on how they achieved something, to what extent they achieved success. I loved that idea, and it's even happening now. Recently, he came home with homework on a project he has to do, and what I love about it is how vague they are about the project. All they have to do is explore what they've learned and show it off in a way that is meaningful for them. I was like, why aren't we doing more of kind of that in our schools? You know, show us what you've learned, show us what's been meaningful for you, and show it in a way. You know, my kid's quite analytical. Another kid is incredibly creative, so he's taking a more sort of writing down what he's learned and bullet pointing it, and another person's creating something that represents it for them. And I just loved that idea of them taking control of their learning, and bringing it back to the classroom in a way that meant something for them. So I think there's no bottom. As soon as we get students, whatever age they are, whatever level they are, we need to be starting with this. We don't want it to be an abrupt, suddenly you're upper intermediate, now you have access to autonomy. We just build it, we scaffold it all the way up. Because my students today are someone else's students tomorrow, and their students today are my students tomorrow. So we just have to start it and build upon it, I think.
So we start young, we give students options around how they present and make visible their learning.
Mm.
And we give them choice in terms of perhaps what they choose to show. Really interesting points there. Lana, if I can come to you, because your context is different to David's and mine. David and I are both here in the UK. You're in Montenegro, I
I'm
believe.
yeah, I'm based in Montenegro. I normally teach teenagers and young adults and teachers. I do teacher training. But what I want to say is that it does not actually depend on the context or on the age of learners, because autonomy as such is a complex idea. It doesn't just appear out of nowhere with new technology. When new technology comes along, it needs a strong foundation. So if we were to imagine an ideal autonomous learner, then it would probably be someone who takes ownership of their learning, right? So I'm just listing the points that you've given in your presentation,
A
who
bit of
can
review.
work independently, like setting goals and managing their time, who knows effective strategies, and how to adapt them, strategies of learning, and how to adapt them to specific goals, right? the one who evaluates resources critically and who stays motivated, meaningfully engaged, and at the same time supported. And when it comes to AI in particular, a big question is how much support teachers should provide and how much learners should rely on them. But anyway, coming back to autonomy first, I believe that autonomy really starts with the teacher. A teacher's own experience with learning, how they mastered the language, how they see learning process, that all shapes their ability to help students become autonomous. If a teacher sees themselves as the only source of knowledge, right, that sage on stage, then they are less likely to encourage independence, or I would say they are very likely to encourage dependence on the teacher and over-reliance on the teacher. While learners also play a role. If they don't already have the skills to learn independently, there's a good chance they'll again rely too heavily on AI tools when they are introduced. So technically, it's all about balance, given enough support to guide learners without making them overly dependent on teachers or AI. And anyway, answering your question, I think that it's important to start with fundamentals of autonomy as early as possible. So the earlier, the better.
And in terms of
And then we can introduce, on top of that, we can introduce new technology, including AI.
So if we perhaps leave AI a little bit for now, you've made a strong point, and I think we're all in agreement with you, that learner autonomy may have come back into focus because of the opportunities that the affordances of AI, but it's been there for years. And it's also linked with learner training and also with teacher training. So can we just perhaps think about what would be three top tips in terms of without technology, what can teachers be doing at an early level when their students are young and at an early level to be encouraging learner independence? How do we get teachers started? Like a toolkit. Any thoughts?
My favorite tip, I can start on that. My favorite tip and most working strategy ever, that's offering choices.
Mhm.
Choice is king in the classroom. That's important to get learners somehow make this decision-making process for themselves. When we assign homework, there should be provided choices what to do at home. And when they start this decision-making later on, it will help them develop this autonomous thinking and take in charge of their own learning. So I would start with choices. Small steps, just several assignments for homework. Pick the one that you like, or pick the text that you would like to read at home.
And do you then, as a follow-up to that, not only explore what the students did and how it went, but also get them to explore why they chose that particular activity over another? And do you also then say, well, next time I want you to choose a different activity type just to see how that goes? Because I am mindful of that research that's been done that suggests that learners who are given free rein in terms of their learning strategies often choose the strategies which are the least effective. And actually, it is advantageous for the teacher to know which strategies work better than others and guide their students in that path without closing down other options. What do you
Well,
think?
that's probably our role as a teacher, right? To be
Yeah.
smart enough. When we offer choices, it doesn't mean that that's a free ride, right? It means that we'll probably guide them into situations when they will try various options for themselves.
So,
So that's about strategizing a bit.
Yeah.
so Lana, for you, it's all about choice. And David, is there anything you would like to add to that?
I mean, I completely agree. Like, I am all about choice. And I do love what you guys are saying there. Like, it won't always go well. They choose something that won't go well. The follow-up for me is the key. You know, you chose this. How did it go? Didn't work for you. What are you going to do next time, kind of thing. So I think that's very much where we come in. In terms of starting young and starting low, I think it does to some extent come back to choice. I used to always, with very young learners, about what are you going to tell your parents about the class today? Basically it's for me, it's always bridging the gap between the classroom and the real world. And I feel if we can do that, we're on the first steps to autonomy. So with like even with beginners, it's giving them agency over the language they learn. Not every piece of vocabulary was created equal for every learner. And I think sometimes we're just flinging a load of stuff and going, it's all the same, have that, you be grand. But the reality is, some of it will be relevant for their context, some of it will be interesting for them, some of them will just sound good. Like it's, I love the word albondigas in Spanish, and I always wanted to use it outside the classroom. So what words do you enjoy using and you want to do? So for me, at the end of every class, or throughout the lesson, it's, this is what we've learned today. What's meaningful for you? What are you taking outside? But also trying to give the layer of, how will you use it? How will you practice it? And getting them to think, okay, I can use this in the shop today. I'm going there. I can tell them, sing this song for my parents or whatever, remind them of this thing I've learned, tell this joke, whatever it is. And I love that bridging of the gap, but giving choice, but making sure there's a layer of, how will you practice it in your life? Not just you like it or tick a box. What's that next step?
I mean, I perhaps add to those two wonderful sort of streams that we're taking this down, the idea of the use of L1, because I think there is this kind of truism that younger learners are not reflective. And I'm not entirely convinced by this. I mean, of course, in terms of cognitive development, the ability to reflect, to think in abstract terms, does develop with age. But I think if we scaffold reflection and think about not necessarily detailed verbal responses, but even traffic light systems, green for it was good, red for it wasn't so good, orange it was terrible, orange for it was okay, and similar, but also to allow L1 for students at a much lower level to be able to articulate, well, this worked for me because I didn't use this because, and I wonder whether that L1 use, because effectively what we're talking about here now is learner training, training learners how to be independent learners, an important, perhaps the most important part of the learner training, I think. And in that respect, I think the role of L1, it's been a dirty word for far too long. And within the context of plurilingualism, translanguaging, I think we need to bring it back.
Definitely. Like if I'm learning Spanish, I'm definitely going to talk about my learning experience in English. That's
Mm.
just what I'm going to do. I just think I've never understood that whole sort of banning L1 from classrooms or ignoring it. I'm like, it's your jumping off point. There's no way you're diving straight into a second language head first without using your L1 as a kind of a bridge or a stepping stone, you know? So yeah, definitely.
You're both teacher trainers. I am as well. And a really interesting question came up in chat from Magella. Hello, Magella. Good to see you here. Which was asking about teacher training and how do we go about the training of teachers in these skills? Because I don't know about courses that you run, but in the UK at least, and it is popular overseas, the level 5 CELTA Cert TESOL, it's a 4-week program if it's done full time, 8 or 10 weeks if it's done part time. There isn't time for everything, and very often teaching teachers how to teach criticality is either done in 30 minutes or it's not done at all. Now, the very fact that we're all here today, we're preaching to the converted. Thank you, everyone, for coming. But any thoughts on how we can enable teachers to master these skills properly? Because AI, there's a big learning curve, isn't there? As much as there is in encouraging learner independence. Perhaps if we think about bring AI into the equation now, how do we develop teachers' skills so that they are able to pass on criticality and responsible AI use to their learners? How do we train them?
Big in. I mean, the thing I keep going back to when everything we're talking about today is motivation. And I think it doing a huge big training on AI, even though I've done it and I will do it again, I feel like we get very little out of it. unless the teacher is motivated to take the first step and to try something out themselves, then they're they're not going to get anywhere. It's just going to be, well, that's something that happened to me. So I think what we need to be doing as managers or teachers or whatever is motivating and giving people the space to try one thing out one time. Because once you realize it's not scary, it sort of gets a life of its own, and you start using it in all different ways. And I think letting them take the first step and helping them to fail and pick themselves back up again, because that's, using AI is all about that didn't go as well as I expected it to, and not abandoning it, keeping going with your prompt and gradually learning. So yeah, for me, if we can motivate to try, then we have something. If we can't,
Lana, what
For
would
me, I don't see AI training as some individual or separate training from teacher training courses or like CPD courses. Primarily because when you use with AI, when you work with AI, what is actually a prompt? A prompt is something that encapsulates our teaching experience. So technically, when you deliver a CPD course and you integrate AI as part of it, for example, you teach critical thinking, right? And you get AI as part of it. So you do not tackle that individually. I think that's the key. And
so
I
then
saw
embedding?
one very good quote online. AI just shows how good you are as a teacher.
That's
So
interesting.
that's the good use. And I think that we should not be probably overwhelming teachers with AI tools, lots of AI tools available. AI is a separate domain and you need the learning curve. We should probably gradually integrate it into CPD courses that we have. So it
So
will become a part of the courses.
So
yeah.
it's an embedded approach. So
Exactly.
be it whether you're looking at criticality, 21st century skills, pronunciation, how to teach grammar, we bring it in. So, back in the old days on those level 5 courses where there would be an input session on technology, and that's gone now, hasn't it? It's much more about technology underpins everything, and perhaps AI will be the underpinning of one particular form of technology. I did want to pick up on something that has come into chat from I think this is George. Hello, George, where he writes, "You model," and this is in response to teachers. "You model the good practices. The teachers follow your lead and they model it, then they model it to their learners." So it's kind of a cascaded um,
Okay.
process.
Mhm.
So the teachers' trainers are giving it to the teachers are then working on it, they're perhaps working with each other, and then they're bringing it into their classes. And why not get the students to teach the students?
Mhm.
And,
I do think that's fair, but there is also motive, like behind all of that is beliefs and worry and fear in the classroom. And I like you can model till the cows come home sometimes. Not to disagree with you, George, but you can model till the cows come home sometimes. But and people will say, yes, this is a very good thing. I see you doing it really, really, really well. But I don't think that would work for me and my learners. And there's something I think, especially with AI right now, there's obstacles in terms of people's beliefs maybe about teaching beliefs, or maybe beliefs about what will that technology won't work for them, or they won't be able to overcome those obstacles. I think that's around AI specifically. That's one of the areas I think we need to put our focus on with.
so getting your hands dirty
Yeah, yeah,
and just trying it out. But I suppose there is a little bit of chicken and egg, because if you don't know what you've got out, it's
exactly.
not very
Yeah,
good. So I guess, there's maybe a social construction here. Uh, don't always do it on your own. I mean, you've got to at some point, but also do it with someone else, and have us, maybe we as teachers just provide questions that help to scaffold the response and think, well, is this reliable? Why not? Have
Mhm.
you checked it out with another source? Does it correlate? So on and so forth. Um, there's an interesting, and I think it is worth moving on to before perhaps we look at tools. In chat, there's a discussion around safeguarding.
Mm.
So Magella has made the point, for safeguarding, etc. I think for this, by which Magella you mean to incorporate safeguarding into AI use, teachers should receive a credible course in AI. And George has responded, agree with Magella. I think teachers need systematic guidance for ethical reasons, and so that they and their institutions don't get left behind. And then Magella then talks about anything that's available for 16-year-olds specifically. I mean, it is a big danger, isn't it? That sort of when the internet came along, we all thought, well, everyone's going to have access to really horrible stuff.
Mm.
And it didn't really pan out quite that way, and the dark web. But in terms of the contexts where you're working, so David, a language school group in the UK, Lana, working with teachers in Montenegro, many of our participants here today are working with that teenage group. What advice can you give if a course isn't available to enable the safeguarding aspect of learners' use of AI and teachers for that matter?
Yeah. I do think it's important, as you were sort of saying, the internet didn't go the way we went. I do think there was a period where young, kids, or people my age were young, using the internet, and parents had no idea what it was or what was on it or what anyone was using it for, and probably wasn't very safe. So I do think we're there now, and I think if you are teaching younger students, we do need to be aware. I think, it's a fair point that it should be part of safeguarding. In terms of what advice, I mean, what I've been trying to do with teachers recently and with people I've been talking to is helping them to see how they can use it outside, and then trying to have that conversation. So it doesn't always, like, the classroom is a scary place to try something out the first time and to be talking about. So one of the tips I give is, put ingredients on your table, take a photo with Gemini and ask it what you could make for dinner, and trying to give them something that they might actually try because it's safe, it's easy. But then it's all about that follow-up that we talked about. What kind of things did you get? Was it valid? What did it do? What did that then scare you? So if we could maybe give people a practical task like that, and then bring the conversation in, and really think critically about that task and where it took them. I think that might be a good starter. But yeah, I think it's a really valid point. We should be doing this more from a safeguarding point of view.
Lana, have you got anything you wanted to add here?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to prepare both students and teachers for the use. So before actually we start experimenting, I'm in a bit, I would say, advantageous position because I'm a developer myself. Somewhat, I love tech. This passion started some 5 years ago, and I started developing various apps for students. And I developed my own AI-powered apps. So I know exactly which instructions I put in, which system instructions I have there, how my bots are supposed to behave. So I basically prescribe everything. I do not use general purpose bots. So these are specifically programmed bots for the needs of my learners. So that makes it a bit different. But anyway, before they start using them, I usually prepare them how to use that, how to use the bots, and which steps they have to go through to make it as a learning, to keep using it as a learning aid, not some sort of kind of shortcut, or as a check-in tool, or just something that will probably produce or generate something for them, like some content. So that's about with the focus on learning, so that they could see that they need to go through certain steps on their own, and then that chatbot will be a learning tool. Otherwise, it will not work. And I just somehow, to give a particular example, I created a few chatbots to help my students improve their speaking skills, reading. There is a specific chatbot for my cue charts. That's a special app for students designed to ask higher order questions. And the chatbot is called Q Chat Buddy. So this buddy is designed to help students check actually not check, but go through the questions that they produced one by one without giving the right response or without correction, asking them to correct them one by one, giving feedback, offering some exercises if they need any. So that's actually a learning tool, not really like a checking tool. And what I can see, I published this board online on my blog. And at the moment,
Linking
there
to
are about
that
probably
to,
over
yeah.
1,000 users who have tried them, who have tried this board. And
Can
when
you
I studied
share,
it,
sorry, Lana, can you share the link to that? Because I think this idea of actually, I think it links in quite nicely to another comment from George about AI policies within schools. That I think as individual teachers, it is our responsibility to safeguard our students at all times. It is our duty. But we must also remember that as teachers, unless we're working as sole traders, and I know we've got a couple with us on the webinar today, the majority of us are working within institutions, private language schools, state schools, universities. And therefore, it is important that we look to our institution for what their line is in terms of an AI policy. And if we don't know, don't wait for the institution to tell you. Go and ask your head of department. Go and ask if you have one, the e-safety officer, and ask them what is our school's policy on X, Y, and Z. And I think if time permits, you've done it. I know that gallery teachers have done it to develop your own chatbot. You have therefore within it, you're excluding some of those elements that you may be concerned are inappropriate for your learners. And therefore, as people get a bit older, 14, 15, 16, maybe even from 12 up, I think open discussions about what worries them, what their concerns are, and tapping into the student's own thoughts and feelings about safeguarding, and then, asking them to share what they've seen that has worked well in terms of keeping them safe, and perhaps within a well-supported conversation by a teacher to make sure it doesn't go anywhere we don't want it to go into in terms of territories. Actually, also looking at some of the problems and the difficulties that students have faced and what their peers would recommend they do as a result. So if something does come up through AI or just through the internet, that students are equipped. Because if we never tell the students what the dangers are, they're not going to be able to respond to the dangers when they face them. And we can't predict that. Um, I'm conscious we have a couple of questions about tools, and this session deliberately did not recommend tools. And my rationale for that, in terms of having a list of you can use AI to develop independence in reading or speaking or whatever, was that A, it's impossible to do so. It's impossible because one day they're there, one day they're not. Secondly, a tool that may be available in one country may not be available in another. That whole big story about ChatGPT in Italy at one point. I think also, as far as tools are concerned, it's invidious because, any list would be some of the things I've used. So can I come to the two of you, and what is your attitude to tools and lists of tools? Should we have them? Should we not? And why? It's David.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always reluctant to give out tools for the reasons you said, and because you mention a tool and then it's free to use, and tomorrow it's behind a paywall or it's gone or whatever. But I also think what is important and what the conversation should be about is how to assess the tool and find one that really, really works for you. Going back to the teach people to fish. But also, I think my general approach is just we should be, and that how when I'm chatting to teachers and students, is everyone should be learning the skills to interact with generative AI. That's what's there and not really going to move. It's going to develop, it's going to get bigger, but that's what I think everyone has access to. When our students leave the classroom, that's where they're going to go, I think. So we need to be, like we kind of said, developing their skills so that they can use it effectively, write prompts and things like that, but also, like we said, recognize the dangers, the bias, the hallucinations, and think critically. So my focus is never really on suggesting tools, but suggesting the skills and teaching the skills people need to interact with all the tools, but specifically the big generative AIs.
Lana, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I completely agree. I also think that it's not really rational to give particular tools. Again, we don't know much about these tools. Even ChatGPT, if we take ChatGPT, do we know the system message that guides ChatGPT? Do we know the temperature that guides ChatGPT? We don't know anything. We have no control over it. There is no transparency. For us as educators, and if we talk about safeguarding, it's important to have transparency. It's important to know which principles are there, right? So as for particular tools, I rarely recommend. I show what I use from time to time because I am also busy playing around with various tools appearing on the market. That's exciting. But I think that for teachers, it is important to know what's available, what kind of like basic technology, what we have, text to speech. If you would like to improve your students' pronunciation or to try and use AI, right, to work on pronunciation, or text to image if you need some images. And again, if you'd like to develop some multimodal content for your classes, right? Or text to speech, and these are large language models. And then we come to the point of how to talk to large language models, right? All the skills. But as for toolista approach, like particular tools, well, I give them as an example, but never recommend them to be included as this obligatory part of the package of the teacher training package.
Right, right. I'm going to post into chat because I totally agree with all of you, but I think there is a desire among some teachers because they may not. It's a bit like when you start a master's or a PhD. Where do I get started? You know that thing about when you find your first article and then someone says to you, okay, what's really valuable about this article is the bibliography at the end. And you start this trail and you kind of start learning how to negotiate your own way. So, in a way, it's perhaps about getting people started. There is on Facebook a really interesting group called Language Teaching with AI that is moderated by Joe Day.
Okay.
And I'm just going to put those details in to chat now because I think for people who want to get started um, and kind of just to experiment and play with things, and again, it's not a recommended list, it's a kind of a curation of lots of teachers just sharing solutions to problems, which I think is really quite useful. So that's going to go into and chat now. Um, okay. I'm just looking at Q&A. Here's an interesting one because, of course, we are the three of us already an international panel. When you start bringing in our participants, very, very international. And one question is the one about are adults, I might extend this to children, influenced by their learning experiences in their home countries? And does this have a knock-on effect in terms of an interest in autonomy? So it strikes me from my experience in the classroom that there are certain cultures which have an expectation that the teacher will teach and the learner will be spoon-fed. And, this has been talked about in terms of the power distance relationship, that the person who's higher up in the food chain is the one who commands and the people lower down expect to be commanded. And I think I'm not going to name them, but I think we can think of areas of the world where spoon feeding is almost the default model. In other areas of the world, perhaps matching political systems. I'm thinking here perhaps of Scandinavia or Holland, where community-based learning is much more common. Um, do you think that adults and children are influenced by their own learning experiences? And is it our role as English language teachers to interrogate that? Or should we just say, that's the context you work in, that's fine?
Ooh. So one of the contexts I've worked in most is adults, but not just adults, but specifically learners above 30. So the school I work for has a number of 30 plus schools, and we 100% see that. Very often people come and there's an expectation of how a classroom is. And whenever I have sort of new 30 plus teachers or opening up a new 30 plus center, my guidance is always the status quo of the class is so important. If you open up a 30 plus class with all new, brand new to the school, they haven't studied English in a long, long time, or maybe been in a classroom in a long, long time, there would often be an expectation of teacher gives, we receive. However, if you add new students to a class with some students who are already, you've been working with them on learning skills and autonomy and everything like that, there is a status quo in the class, and you see people kind of go, all right, I guess this is how we do it now. And everyone gets involved, and very quickly they sort of get on board with it. And again, this is continuous enrollment, new students each week. This is a constant process. But I do think it's our role to be developing those skills, to be setting that status quo, to be setting it as a school and a teacher as a class. But I definitely think we're all influenced by how we learned. But I don't think that's the end of the line. I think it's very easy to develop those skills, especially if people see them working quickly.
And also how we were taught as
Yeah,
teachers,
exactly.
how we were taught probably as well. Lana,
Well, I think our role as educators is to bring change, right? So even if the context is strict, probably if we take small steps and if we show to students that by taking this or that strategy, they will achieve more, right? We'll bring on that necessary change.
Mm.
That's our role.
and
We
on
probably should not just adapt our teaching strategy to the local context, but we should be trying to introduce this change, showing to them what they get, and that's again reflection and achievement. So we'll make probably learning visible to make sure that they adapt and adopt the change that we're bringing on.
Mm.
I'm conscious that we're very close to the end, but I think this brings us back to a very, very interesting comment in chat. Was talking about, it was George who made the point about if you think you haven't and I think you haven't realized how AI will transform education and transform the role of the teacher if you think it's about choice. George probably is one of those people who's been into more schools, at least in the UK, than practically anyone. George, I don't know if you are able just to come onto microphone and just pick talk a little bit about this. I'm just giving you permission to talk. George, if you're willing to, then if you'd just like to give us your thoughts behind that comment as a way of bringing the session to an end. Hi, George.
Hi there. I've been really impressed by all the comments made by the audience as well as our esteemed leaders on this 90 minutes. I just feel that AI is going to have such a transformative effect upon English language teaching that on the one hand we want people to take small steps, but I think we really do need to make sure that the guardrails are there to help them and to support them. And I think as if we're looking at it from the point of view of teacher trainers or managers, we have to make sure that people have got the support they need to develop those skills. Because I think as someone said, you're not going to lose your job to AI, but you're going to possibly lose your job to someone who knows AI. And I think in the future, the educational establishments that are going to thrive are the ones that are providing the support to their teachers and to their learners to take advantage in a principled way with these marvelous resources, which at the same time carry with them a lot of concerns.
And I think as I listen to you, George, and you and I have had quite a lot of conversations about this one way or the other, the one word that stands out more than any in what you've just said is principled. And I can see Lana and David nodding their heads, and I wouldn't
Yeah.
be surprised if nearly everyone else who is listening to us today in their homes are also nodding their heads. So I know that there are more sessions coming up from GTEFL on the use of AI. So, George, thank you so much for your, as always, thought-provoking comments, both in chat and now also through the microphone. Thank you.